We are live. Hello, everyone. Let me get Instagram over there rolling. Hopefully, everyone's having a lovely Monday, staying
Uh,
cool. How's your weather, my dear?
we're hot. We're over 100. Woohoo!
Yeah, it was warm here too. I don't think we ever broke. I mean, heat index was above 100, but I think we
Oh
just
no.
hit high 90s.
Yeah. No, it's definitely summer in the South, right? For me. So, anyway, welcome back to the Beyond Nutrition Community Podcast, where we go beyond food and fitness and dive into deeper work, right? Mindset, growth, healing, and becoming the person who you're meant to be. And I'm Sherry, and tonight I am with my co host. You are?
Coach Becky, sorry, I'm freezing. So
You're freezing, yeah.
hopefully you can hear me. But yes, I know we just got through talking about my weather and my internet. So
We
hopefully,
did. Well, I'm Sherry and this is Becky. And tonight, we're really glad you're here because we've got a conversation that I would say most people experience, but not a lot of people talk about it openly. And it's the part of healing that no one really prepares you for. We hear about growth and it's a glow up, right? And it's a breakthrough and ooh, it's a fresh start. But we don't talk about what gets left behind. Because the truth is, when you start to heal, you start changing. And when you change, your relationships shift. Some deepen, some become uncomfortable, and some quietly or even suddenly fall away. So, we're going to have that honest conversation tonight. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. So, I guess we can just kind of dive in. What do you think, Becky?
absolutely, it's one of those that fit, like you said, the honest and vulnerable coaches speak. All right, and what better time than summer to have the conversation?
Right? So healing disrupts, right? Long standing emotional relationship patterns,
So,
not just yours, but everyone connected to you. Are you still having trouble?
I am. I'm attempting at fixing it, but I don't know. Hopefully that's better.
That's funny. Oh, it wouldn't be a live podcast if we didn't
Yeah,
have technical difficulties.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully it's better, and we're able to make this through. But um, yeah, I mean everyone does end up and go through it, right? And as we dive into not only our own journey but the real aspect, right? I think that's part of the reason where people aren't as open or maybe as honest with their journeys. And I'll put it that way because
Mhm.
it's whether it's a nutrition journey or maybe a circadian journey or what type of healing journey they are, people evolve, right? And
Mhm.
people don't always like it when other people evolve or change, or change. Sometimes change isn't easy. Sometimes we have to make change in order to grow, and sometimes people are like little crabs in a bucket, and we they constantly want to keep pulling you down, right, to make you fit into their space. um and ultimately, sometimes we kick the little crabs off and they stay in the bucket and we grow, right? So that's where one of the biggest things is, working on like the inner work. You and I talk about working on a person's self and that mindset a lot. I mean, we talk about it even in our coaches roundtable and
Mhm.
what that looks like. And it's just being being able to regulate that nervous system, shift out of, that survival mode of being the mirror neuron of the people around you, right? And that's where sometimes it's even, not just friends, but family that maybe they don't get it, or they start distancing and pulling back, and friends start to feel uncomfortable, right? So there's a lot of people in the space right now. I see it in other colleagues, other friends also that are dealing with it too. And I guess I can give, my side of the journey, coming out of the various quote dietary camps, right?
Yeah.
The carnivore space. When I started to reintroduce and, open that up, that, hey, maybe carnivore isn't the only way, right? I was still working, actively hosting meetings for a carnivore platform, but we were starting to see that there were those some people that maybe it's green beans, maybe it's sauerkraut, maybe it's, you know, blueberries, or whatever the case may be, where someone wanted to add food in.
Hmm.
And there was such a pushback by, select carnivore, not necessarily the over one of them, that runs the platform, right? That I was working for, was very open that, hey, if it works for you,
Yeah.
by all means end up and do it. The other one was kind of the one that kind of gave a little bit of pushback because they felt it was very conflicting. Um, which ultimately, the goal is always to find health, right? And that's where, if people are struggling and they're white knuckling and they're, struggling to do this, but they feel good if they have some blueberries with their lunch, or sauerkraut with their, hot dog, right? Who am I to say that they're doing it wrong? And that's kind of where, losing people along the way, right? um Carnivore is a great community. They have a lot of meetups, they have a lot of gatherings, low carb, right? Low carb has a cruise, low carb has conferences. Same thing with keto, right? Keto
Hmm.
Palooza, keto, there's so many conferences around keto.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to even make its way into, like the bodybuilding side.
Yeah.
Um, but no one talks about those that are able to still rebuild their metabolism. They're able to do that through whole foods, circadian based, right? Signal based eating. There's not really a space in, online networks for
Hmm.
that, right? Because one, it's not going to end up and make you money saying, hey, eat whole foods, right?
Right.
It's just, and it sounds too simple, too good to be true, right? It's not a promise of, oh, you need to end up and eliminate all these, plants because they're going to kill you, or you need to, do this, right? There's no sales pitch in eat whole foods, eat regular foods,
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Well, I mean, people may, it kind of starts out like this, right? Oh, you've changed.
Mhm.
Or what's going on with you? And people often feel most comfortable with the version of you that required the least adjustment from them, not necessarily the version that's healthiest for you. That's a hard pill to swallow. I'm going to repeat that. So people often feel most comfortable with the version of you that required the least adjustment from them, not necessarily the version that's healthiest for you. Wow.
Yeah. And that's where the former versions of ourselves, like years ago when I was, almost 200 pounds or even over 200 pounds, having, more emotional eating, right? When we have gatherings, or, life events, right? It's always tied around food or it's tied around, drinking. And I'm not going to end up and say that I'm perfect and I never end up and have, a drop of alcohol, or that we still don't, do the friend gathering and that type of thing. But it's one of those same circle, a healthier version. And when people are, kind of like you said, bonding over complaining or quick fixes or commiserating, right?
Hmm.
And then once I kind of started my own transformation, yes, I do have that, group of friends, right, that are very supportive. But there are certain people that they don't like the fact of being able that I was able to prioritize myself, that I was able to end up and shift, and they couldn't relate to that,
Right.
right? They're constantly burning, they're constantly going, they're constantly, just eating things that maybe they know aren't healthy for them, but now that I choose not to, it makes them uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you ever get people justifying why they're eating around you, whatever it is?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whether it's, something, obviously not ideally healthy, like a cookie or a piece of cake or, something like that.
Right.
But a lot of times, for instance, if we go out to eat or something like that, well, I don't do it often. I'm just gonna, it's
Right.
like it's your food, right? I'm not gonna end up and justify what you're eating or complain about what you're eating or judge what you're eating, right?
Right.
And that's where also when we look at the body as a whole, right? When we look at this whole like vibration frequency side of things that we're putting out as we are progressing through this, healing raises that base, right? When we're looking at it from a nervous system standpoint, and we've gone through that and we've put in the work, and we've talked in the past numerous times about the affirmations and the journaling and the breath
Yep.
work and all of this, that's raising that. And so old relationships, oftentimes they ended up and thrived on drama or on the wounds, and it almost was created like a codependency.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, as people heal, right, they no longer match that energy. And so, the old saying, right, birds of a feather flock together. But
Right.
now, when you're flying a little bit higher, right, and you've set those boundaries, um, people, and you stop people pleasing, right? That was one of the things, and I think I have it still set in my drafts, because it was like, love me or hate me, essentially. you know I don't care. And I just had this conversation with my son too, in regards of friends, right? I could probably, count on one hand the amount of friends, um but I also have a, family.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the family ends up and, you outgrow or have to set those healthy boundaries with them too. But healing exposes a lot of people who have attached to the wounds. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way.
I'm going to talk about a particular best friend of mine, um, 30 years. She battled um, excessive weight. Um, she ultimately passed away. It'll be 5 years in October. But when I started down my healing journey, and it literally started about a month before she passed away. And that's when I had Googled, right, keto. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the difference between dirty keto. I just didn't know, right? I was barely getting started because what I had done previous decades wasn't working. And one of them was I had had a major health crisis 6 months earlier. And they blamed my diabetes for the cause of my medical issue. And so that summer, I set out to follow the recommendations of the American Diabetes Association. And I went and got blood work after the summer was over, and my A1C was worse. And that's when I started down again. Nothing was working. So I Googled keto and I started walking. When I say walking, I would walk 4 houses down in our subdivision and turn around and come back. I mean, at the time, I was, I don't know, 250, 60 pounds. And so that was a big deal. Well, my best friend of 30 years, I would call her on my hands free headset. And the first couple times she talked to me, and then she stopped answering the phone when I would call her when I was walking. And like I said, she passed away then a month later. She became my motivator for this is no longer a diet. This is now a healing journey because I was fast approaching the same situation. I was going to, end up passing away. We all are, I understand, but I was going to probably do it sooner rather than later. And so she, to this day, remains my constant in my forefront on why I am so adamant about this healing journey. But it hurt when she stopped talking to me when I would go on the walks. Now she talked to me otherwise, right? But just not during those time periods when I was walking, and it hurt. And I remember that hurt, but it was, and I understood what it was, right? I was trying to better myself, and she wasn't, and she couldn't face that about herself. So that's a relationship. And then, of course, then she passes away, right? Shocking, but there's kind of a little scenario on maybe if someone can relate to that. Anything that you can identify with, Becky?
Well, it's just, I mean, there's been multiple times where, having correspondence or having people even in a meeting or, even like I said, it's not just on the dietary side of things
Right,
where, you know, those spaces, but even just in the last year where or year and a half, um, where I really got, more serious about working on the nervous system, especially nervous system, somatic practices, those type of things. Um, People they also put up a wall because if they don't understand it, instead of asking questions, right? So if you're watching, feel free to end up and ask questions. I would rather someone end up and come to a meeting, come to, our lives and ask questions,
right.
right? Ask questions about the journey, ask questions about any, tools or things that have helped through it, right? You and I both have used various things where, like I said, there's times that, you know, people don't understand, and like you said, they distance, or you have that normal structure with them
Right.
and then it falls apart, you know.
Well, because your healing raised your standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your higher emotional awareness, stronger boundaries, less tolerance for things. Because again, it's a mindset, it's a or dietary, whatever the healing journey is, right? And you realize that maybe a friendship or a relationship of any kind is kind of revolves around negativity or complaining or let's go eat
Right.
constantly, right? And eat bad things. And so what felt normal now feels draining. And the awareness removes your ability to comfortably stay in environments that doesn't align with you anymore.
And it can be tough. And that's why, a lot of times we do work on the mental side of it, right? We work on that safety net, if you will, because really, it's funny because we just had this conversation tonight, my husband, daughter, and I, about in order to show up, right? In order to be present, in order to be out there, whether it's job, friends, family, whatever, you have to end up and love yourself first.
Hmm.
And, and that was one of the biggest things throughout the journey, right? Was I didn't like how I looked. I didn't like, I was willing to end up and do the small things that it took um to help raise that standard for myself,
Hmm.
right? And be that better version of myself and keep going. That was the biggest thing is the consistency to keep going.
Yeah.
Um it wasn't perfect, like I said, it evolved. But I also learned to not do it in isolation. I learned those people that I could confide in, the community, just like our BNC community, right? Um, Making those connections over there, even if it is just to jump on a meeting and talk about, whatever the talk may end up and being,
Hmm.
it's still connecting with people that have the same path, not same path, the same goal, right? The
Right.
healing side of things.
Right.
And, just kind of creating those relationships, if you will, in
Hmm.
the or friendships in the mode of better self-trust, better healing, better, boundaries really has helped um,
Yeah.
move that needle too.
Right. And I mean, a lot of it, you could have started therapy, journaling. It's a personal development, right? And someone may respond to you like, "Oh, you're better than everyone else," or, "Oh, you've just changed too much." And it triggers defensiveness in others because it kind of puts a spotlight on maybe what they're avoiding, and they can't look at that.
Mhm. For sure. It's one of those where, again, when a person dives deep, right? When a
Mhm.
person is looking, I'm not going to end up and say that I had the perfect childhood. I'm not going to say that I had, the perfect early adulthood, right? But when a person is reframing and, trying to end up and better themselves, society is so quick to tear people down.
Mhm.
They're so quick to, jump in there and try and, guide them, right? Or try and tell them the optimal way to end up and do something, right? That part I can relate with because at one point I was working out, downstairs, and okay, I'm not the fitness guru. We talked about this earlier. That's one of my
Yeah.
my goals for July is to end up and work on the activity and building the muscle and the whole fitness side. Um, but that was also because people would critique the way I
Yeah.
was doing it and they would tell me
Yep.
that it was wrong, instead of just trying to uplift and say, hey, coming from a place of um, positive critiquement, I guess, it was more like trying to tear a person down, right?
Yep.
And so what happened? I quit, right? I stopped doing it and then I started calling it the imperfect workout
Yes.
because because I felt like if I called it the imperfect workout, then people weren't looking towards it being perfect, right?
Mhm.
So I jumped ahead of that. right? And it was constantly like trying to be a step ahead, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, but it did stop the critics.
Yeah.
Um, because sometimes, the same thing happens when a person is along their journey, right? And that's where information overload or too many different ways of doing something, we start to disconnect it with ourselves,
Yes.
and we try to follow something that works for someone else.
Yep. We both
And
we both have been
mm,
there on that. Yeah.
yep. And that's where just because a tool or a practice or a lifestyle works for someone else, there are, healing signals, if you will, within yourself that will give you guidance on a natural shift that is best for you.
Yeah. And
So
there's a
go ahead.
loneliness phase in that, right?
Hmm.
It's healing takes you kind of into a transition phase where you've outgrown your past, but you haven't fully built your future. And so you kind of feel disconnect from relationships, friendships, whatever, but you don't have the new aligned relationships in place. And identity change of any type often creates a temporary phase of social disconnection. And that is one of the reasons that you started the BNC community.
Yeah, because I was going beyond the nutrition, right? I
Right.
wasn't looking at just dietary. I didn't want the labels essentially.
Right.
I wanted to create a collective where we were able to gather and not feel as though we were breaking any loyalty to one way or the other, right?
Yep.
Not necessarily rocking the boat over here in the carnivore space or the keto space or the circadian, right? Um, it was kind of bringing everyone just together and
Mhm.
exposing those dynamics, right? Rallying around this identity that no one really ended up and had
Right.
the set, category, right? It was, well, I work out and I eat this, but I may end up and add dairy, or maybe I add this or that, or and so just drop all of that, and congregate and be able to create this identity rewiring, if you will. And that's where we kind of brought the dialogue back into to the community, because we don't have meaning a lot of meaning specifics, right?
Right.
Where we are, this is one carnivore 101 or keto 101 or whatever, right? It's a case of, if you have questions, great. If you are going through grief and you just need someone to talk to, come to the meeting. If
Yep.
you're simply just trying to survive, right, um and need someone to talk to, right? Need someone to connect with. You need that human voice, because, like you said, it can be lonely, it can be
Yeah.
isolating. And so being able to, come in and even just hear people, or talk to people.
Right. And we talk about nervous system, right? That's part of my journey that I had to address my nervous system. I don't know how many years ago it's been now, but I remember you saying, "Oh, are you stressed?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 I'm not stressed, not me." Right? Little do we know. And I think that's most people, and I think most people can identify with that. But see, those are the people, like, come into these meetings. Like, we have everybody in the meetings. This is what I love about it, is on a different healing path, different dietary, how they're eating, different, we've talked about what blood work, we've talked
Mhm.
about, our labs, it's such a wide range. I think the last couple weeks we've been talking about gut health. Like that's
Yeah.
been that's been a thing. And one of I don't know if you were in my meeting last week. Were you in that? Where
Part
one
of
of
it.
the members was saying how frustrated she was with another coach that was trying to tell her the basics. You know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
And she's been there, done that, kind of like, you know, and she really was kind of, I don't want to say offended, but disheartened,
Yeah.
right? That the person, that coach, and again, not in our BNC group, wasn't listening, right? And that's something that we feel that it's super important in the BNC community.
Yeah, being able to be heard. That's the
Hmm.
biggest thing is, not feeling like someone is being talked down to, but that being able to actually talk and, having that space, holding that space, because it is a case where people oftentimes they know information, right?
Right.
Maybe they don't know how to end up and structure the information, but a lot of times they have done the research, they've looked things up, they're able to, they're well educated, right? People aren't dumb. um and it takes a lot to be very vulnerable to come into a space or to come to a coach and get support. And when you come to someone and that's the way they're, you know, I don't want to say their approachability, but that's the way their demeanor is off put to you. It's just it almost
Right.
creates more of that isolation, right? It makes you want to almost kind of go back and hibernate some more. It's
Yeah.
just feelings get shattered. It's rough. It's, people remain quiet then.
Right. And pushback, really, honestly, it's part of the adjustment phase. Um, but holding your boundaries. And that's where community helps too. I can't tell you the countless times in our meetings that we've talked about holding boundaries, right? Or somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to a wedding in a week, and they're gonna have, grandma's gonna right
Yeah.
expect me to, or whatever it is." And they were stressing about that wedding or that event. And just being able to talk about that, giving them some tools in their tool belt of, I'm choosing something different for myself, or that doesn't work for me anymore, or don't you want me to be healthy? We gave them tools for that toolbox. So, and it's okay. Not everyone is meant to understand your growth journey, but clarity within yourself is really where it matters more than the external approval.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Absolutely.
here's,
And that's
I'm,
where,
yeah.
again, really looking at, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, early in my healing journey, and I'm going to throw my husband under the bus, um, early on, right? And again, I was eating a certain way. I was so terrified of even going to like I would look up menus in restaurants and fret over what I could have and would have a plan and figure it out, and that social that my husband and I had of, hey, let's go eat here, became, I'm not going to go. I'm not eating there. Right now, it's different now than what it was. But I think he kind of grieved that we would go out every Saturday night and get something to eat, and we would try all these different restaurants, and that stopped because of my healing journey. Um, and I just remember that early on. I'm sure you remember that phase, don't
Hmm.
you, Becky? Yeah.
Hmm.
It was like, because he wasn't eating like I was eating. So he didn't understand. He didn't understand why I was so dogmatic about why I wouldn't just go. It took me how many years? It was like if there was bacon that was cured with sugar, I wouldn't buy it. I was militant, um, but it was part of my journey, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And that's, again, creating that full on restriction of yourself, is also a very isolating
Hmm.
aspect when it comes to, the topic of pushing people away. Because even if it's our significant other, right, they may not understand,
Right. Right.
right? But that may end up and also protect us and our vulnerability, because, the less we share, the less that we put out there, right? In those that, may end up and critique, right? Again, it is kind of a conversation around like the boundary setting and how to,
Yeah.
kind of go about that. But you got to sometimes being consistent, right? Or just
Right.
saying, like you said, I'm focusing on this right now. And,
Hmm.
it takes it out of you feeling, or them feeling like you just don't want to go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It kind of flips that and changes the trajectory of that conversation. So it's
Yeah.
not, they're not important to you. It's, I'm trying this, or, I'm focusing on this.
Yeah, it's funny. Every year, um, my girlfriends and I meet up at my girlfriend's lake house, and we have this annual cookie bake. And it's not just, oh, let's bake a few cookies. This is like we have like six stand mixers going of the same dough, putting them in baggies and cleaning the bowls, and starting six stand mixers of the same dough of the next set. Like, the pictures I have is outrageous of the amount of cookies that we bake, right? We take a weekend, and then we end up giving the cookies away. And this past year, this in December when I went, um, my girlfriend said to me, so I brought some steak, and I brought some this, and I brought some this. And I said, "Oh, it's okay. I've changed the way I'm eating." I had her so conditioned. It was kind of funny, but she respected that, right? She here, I'm making you eggs for breakfast, Sherry, or whatever it is. It was sweet. But here's the thing: is you have to ask yourself, why did you start down this healing journey? And you also have to ask what you're willing to no longer tolerate, right? And those are your anchors when things feel uncertain.
Absolutely. Identifying those whys. And that's one of the,
Yeah.
things that we talk about with Sly a lot is
Hmm.
why are you doing it? She talked about doing the 7 layer deep. Um, but really also figuring out what drains your energy and what lifts that energy, right? Does time with
Hmm.
this person leave you feeling, inspired and regulated, or are you more anxious and exhausted, right?
Yeah.
And also, again, building that confidence within yourself, right? Because the old identity versus the new identity, right, can be two different persons. You're the same person, you are just sometimes relating to an old version that was simply in survival mode.
Yeah.
And the people pleaser, right? Or the emotional eater because someone else is eating a cookie, or someone is, doing something else, or the group that is nothing but complaining about X, Y, or Z, right? Whatever the case may be. And when you strike a conversation, right, in regards, uh, sometimes that conversation doesn't fit, the
Yeah.
same environment, right? And that's something that you got to end up and feel. And, if they don't respect the growth, if there isn't that mutual interest in what you've been doing, right? Or they try to be dismissive, right? How many times have you heard, oh, it's you're on another diet?
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
and I've been there, right? I did the Weight Watchers, I did, carnivore, I did keto, I did, the list goes on. But, oh, it's another diet. No, this is my new lifestyle. This is, being able to set that boundary and identify. And that's one thing that I've even had to have a conversation with people close with me, um, in regards of what I do, right? What is it that you do, or what is it that you have changed? And that's sometimes a hard conversation or a hard pill, quote pill, for people to swallow. Coming from the person that I don't like supplements, I don't like pills, and got off of all of my pharmaceuticals. That is a hard pill for others to end up and swallow, that you are able to outgrow that and you're able to put those values and align them, um, but yet still find common ground.
Mhm.
I still have some of my same interests, right? It's just I have different boundaries. And so,
Right.
sometimes making a list and again, going back to the journaling, right? Do a
Mhm.
quick audit. I call it an audit exercise, right? What is your energy? What is the boundary that you had to set that day? What is, the physical, right?
Yeah.
When you're in a situation, is your chest tight? Is your shoulders relaxed? I'm notorious for pulling my
Mhm.
shoulders up and tensing my shoulders, through there, right? Um, or when you think about going into a situation, what is that physical sensation that your body feels,
Mhm.
right? So living intentionally is my biggest thing.
Right. Well, and you know, heal people, right? Not by being perfect, but by being present. Um, you know, you and I started out in a group. You were a coach. I was a member, and because of we became best friends because of our common ground, right? Now your healing looks different than my healing, and but it your people are out there is my point,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's I think it's just so important to um, know that the right people are going to meet you where you are and who you're becoming. Um, in fact, let me tell you what my best friend bought me. What is that? Oh, because I didn't want to measure myself because I'm like, oh, it's hard to measure myself and take my measurements. And I now have a no excuse. Thank you, Becky.
I was just say, did you like that note in there too?
Uh-huh. I did. I did. It was funny. Yeah, I came home to this like today. Yeah. So, yeah, I have no excuses. So, it's got batteries in it and when I get off the podcast, I'm going to be taking my measurements. But that's what I'm saying. People will meet you where you're at, right? I was throwing up barriers on why I couldn't take my measurements and she took that away from me. So,
I did. But there again, right? It's things like that that when you find your people, you find your circle, you find those relationships to be able to support one another. I could have easily been like, "Oh, it's okay," or "Oh, don't worry about it this month. Don't worry about it this week. Don't." But no, it's a case of I know where you're heading and I know that, I can send it to you. Now, if someone else, it may not have come across the same way, right? I'm not just going to end up and send that to anyone and everyone, right? As far
right.
as, but again, it's supporting that person, right?
Right.
It's reaching that hand back. It's, get encouraging, right? There's
Yeah.
so many negative people or negative aspects out there in regards of people in general, right?
Mhm.
Um, that each other don't support and protect the progress. They would rather end up and tear a person apart or critique it or criticize it or, whatever the case may be, right? And that's where, again, if the truth to carry someone on, sometimes that is that hard reality, right? Just like I referred earlier about my workouts. Was it the honest truth that, yes, I obviously didn't need to end up and change, but, it's also in the delivery, right? And it was the way that they were saying it in a downgrading, belittling,
Mhm.
basically like I didn't know what I was doing type mentality, right? Where we have the community, and I call him our community expert. We have a couple of them, and they're able to be like, no, this is how to
Right.
do it. This is, the way to, because you can injure yourself, right? And they would even actually send a video, right?
Mhm.
So just it's that rewiring, that type of boundary to protect your progress so you don't feel defeated, you don't feel isolated, as you're trying to, carry on and better yourself, and know that there's space out there.
Well, and let's talk about social media right now because there's really nothing wrong with blocking and removing people that don't serve you. And it sounds harsh, but it's the truth, right? If someone isn't adding value to your life, what good are they? If they don't reciprocate the energy and the effort that you're putting in, like your workouts that you were talking about, what was the point in keeping them around? And relationships, whether they're friendships, family, intimate ones, it requires work and intentional effort. But if someone's not going to meet you halfway, and we're talking about the social media side here, right? It's time to block them or unfriend them, because you don't have the energy to put into anything less than what you're doing.
Well, and that's where I've always said, my social media, no matter which platform it seems to be, is more to try and help inspire people, to
Sure.
show people, just like our podcast, right? We are real people. We are, you know, we were in the trenches with you, right? We are no better than the next person. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, a full highlight reel. There's going to be days that, we don't feel like showing up, right? Maybe we're not able to put a happy smile on our face and be
Yeah.
that butterfly that everyone is looking for. But that's okay, because guess what? I didn't start my social media to, hit 1 million followers, or same thing with the YouTube, right? I
Hmm.
started it way back when, and we're talking 20, I don't know, 16, 17, for accountability of myself. Because again, remember that when I started keto, there wasn't the keto spaces. We lost
Hmm.
our local Weight Watcher meeting, and that's when I kind of, started looking at what else can I do,
Hmm.
that is something similar. And I went through like meta training, and I went through, that whole side of things,
Hmm.
and it was, I realized even at that point, when I started to use my fitness pal, that I needed to a place that I could post my pictures. I could post my food. I could post what I was doing, because if I wasn't willing to post it, then I wasn't
Hmm.
going to eat it.
Right.
And that was one thing that I, had made a commitment to myself. Again, commitment, boundary, whatever you want to say. And So I started Instagram. I mean, I have my Facebook page, but that was just a personal page. I didn't have, my business coaching page at that point.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it was, you know, I wasn't out there. So I'm not afraid to, mute, unfollow, unfriend, whatever the case
Mhm.
may be, people that trigger that comparison or pull that old identity,
Mhm.
right? The complaining, the bickering, the, negativity, right?
Yes.
Being able to have that transition, strategy in place for, social media is huge because one, less scrolling, right? And that's one of the challenges that we've done in the BNC community is getting off cell phones an hour before bed. And that is one of the hardest
It is.
boundaries
Yep.
for people to set with themselves. People struggle so much with that part of the challenge.
Mhm.
And it's almost like it's an addiction,
Yeah.
like they're addicted to it.
Yeah,
So,
when I got kicked off of Instagram and Facebook because, and I'll be brutally honest, the AI got me. The AI mistook me walking barefoot in the snow with my feet. I was cold exposure and grounding. It was snow on the ground, and it was like 3 steps, and AI deemed it inappropriate. So I have been kicked off of those sites. And when I can tell you that I felt lost without that and didn't realize like how much I had become dependent on it. Yes, I'm on other social media sites now. I probably don't post as much as I should, but and again, that goes along with my coaching and things like that and my healing journey that I want, again, people to see. And because I know that people out there are struggling like I was and am and whatever. And I want them to know that there's it's not an easy, very few people can go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Oh, boom, I'm healed, right? And I've lost all my weight, and look how beautiful I look. And right, I think most people seriously struggle with the healing process, and so I'm getting better at putting myself out there. We've just had this conversation, um, but and you've put it out there too for you, right? So basically what we're saying is healing isn't linear.
mhm,
It's not easy. It's we navigate through it, and we have to remember that our peace, my peace, your peace, everybody listening and watching, our peace is non-negotiable. And so you need to protect that fiercely, even if it means making some tough choices, because at the end of the day, you're worth it. I'm worth it. And being transparent about the messiness of the journey is also part of how we reclaim our strength. Um, you know, so I don't know if that helps or hinders about the social media. I know you've definitely blocked some people along the
yeah.
way.
Yep. But again, it's setting that boundary, and that's
Yep.
the biggest thing for, anyone that may be listening tonight, right? We've covered so much in regards of boundaries and losing people and, being okay with it, right? It's okay to be that person or be that reason, because healing shifts relationships, and how to identify that why behind each one, the grief, the identity, the rewiring, and all of that comes with it, the boundaries, to protect your progress, and nervous system tools. We talk about a lot of these things, you and I both, in our coaching.
Hmm.
And I guess the truth that I want, people to end up and carry with them is losing people in this season doesn't mean you're doing your healing wrong. It just
Right.
means that you're doing it right? You're no longer available to the dynamics that kept you small and dysregulated and stuck in that stress survival mode.
Right.
And you're not broken. Your metabolism isn't broken. It's just it's been trying to survive and protect you. And sometimes the same is true, for relationships too. And sometimes, just like, the fruits and vegetables need pruning, right? Even when it hurts, it's still making space for connections that match. So finding your people, finding those that you align with, and building those better relationships. So
Yeah. So if healing has made you feel heavier, right? Heavier than you expected, it's costing you friendships or connections or even parts of your identity. Take a moment and breathe, right? You're not broken, like Becky just said, you're evolving. The right people don't leave because you're healed, they align with who you're becoming. And the ones who fall away were often connected to the version of you that you've outgrown. So growth isn't about what you gain, it's also about what you release. And sometimes losing people isn't a side effect, right, of healing, it's a part of the process. So as you go into this 4th of July weekend, long weekend, holiday. I know a lot of businesses are closed on Friday, right? Take a step back and know who you are. You can go have fun in your groups and your fireworks and your family gatherings, and just hold tight to your reasoning, your whys that we talk about. Um, Anything you want to add, Becky?
no, ma'am, I think we pretty much covered it tonight. Make sure you join us all next week.
Yes.
We will be back live, and it will be the first Monday of the month. So we will actually have a roundtable
Yeah,
with
in
our
fact,
coaches.
yeah, we're going to talk about what clients don't hear enough from coaches, right? And there's going to be 4 of us coaches on this one, so you don't want to miss it. It's going to be a powerful conversation. But if this episode resonated with you, right? Or someone needs to hear that, please share it with someone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We do read all the comments, and I guess we'll see you guys next week on July 6th at 7 p.m. Central Time, and then we upload it the next day, right, Becky, to
Yep. Yep,
all
it'll come
the
out on all the audio only versions, Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, all of your audio only versions on Tuesday morning. So
absolutely.
have a wonderful and happy, safe 4th of July, and we will see you next Monday. Bye.